This is the second thing that happens. If even this does not happen, then what happens? The dua is stored up for you in the shape of thawab. Now this is such love on the part of Allah. Imagine you're praying for a child or for a career or for health or for wealth or whatever. But Allah is giving you thawab for that. But if He feels that the time is not right, you don't get it, even then you get it in one way or the other. On the Day of Judgment, so much thawab that it says in the hadith, the gist of which is that a man will look at that mountain of thawab and say, I wish none of my prayers had been answered. Can you imagine in dunya when we make a dua, we're so impatient, we want the answer now. Before I've even said Ameen, it should appear before my eyes. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us, you will see that sawab and then you will wish, I wish none of them had ever been answered. This is the meaning of ujibu. It is being answered in one form or the other. Now let's take a look at the next words. Whose prayers are actually accepted? Because this is another great block in our mind. Oh, I am such a sinner. I don't even pray 5 times a day. I don't do this. I don't obey Allah. Why on earth would Allah want to listen to me? So Allah says, Ujibu da'wat ad-da'i. I answer the call of the one who calls. A da'i is anonymous. It could be you, it could be me, it could be the man on the street, it could be my servant working at home, it could be a rich person working in his office, it could be a scholar, a da'i. This can be anyone and everyone. And it's not for you and I to pass judgments and say, oh, look at him, he's such a sinner, does he really think his dua is going to be accepted? Allah says, da'wat ad-da'i, and that's good enough for us. This can be anyone. Now this leads us to a very important conclusion, that the best dua is the dua that you make for yourself. You should ask people to pray for you because there are certain people, for instance, a parent's prayer for the children, or maybe a scholar's prayer or a teacher's prayer for the students. Obviously, these do have a level of acceptance, but no one is going to make your request with the desperation and passion and eloquence that you're going to plead your own case. Remember that. Because this is what Shaitan teaches us. You're such a sinner, no one's going to listen to your dua. Tell a scholar, tell someone pious to pray for you. You'll have heard many people come up to you and say, you're so good, you pray 5 times a day, please pray for me. And I always wonder that, yes, of course, we should pray for each other, but what about you praying for yourself? I mean, you wouldn't expect someone to come up to you and say, you're such a nice person, I wish you would eat food on my behalf. If we're not prepared to yield any of our worldly advantages to others, then why on earth are we prepared to relinquish this treasure of dua to someone else? Ujibu da'wat ad-da'i. I answer the call of anyone who calls me. But the point is, idha da'ani, when he calls on me. Now, how often do we call on Allah? With depth, with sincerity, with passion, with yearning, with hope? How often, when was the last time we cried before Allah? When was the last time we confided in Allah? When was the last time we told Allah secrets that no one else knew? When was the last time that we told Allah of our problems? If you listen to teenagers' conversations on the phones and they'll pour out their lives to each other and their ambitions and their dreams and their greatest fears. I mean, the poor parents have to pay for this in the bill, but that's not the point. The point here is we bore people to death by telling them in great painful detail about all our ambitions, all our worst fears, our worst nightmares. People love talking about themselves. But when it comes to confiding in Allah, suddenly it's, I have to do this and I have to do that. Suddenly it's just, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. Ameen. That's it. I've done my duty, now I can forget Allah. The tragedy is that when we forget Allah, we forget ourselves. How do we do that? Because to know Allah or to try and know Him is to understand that I am nothing. I am simply nothing. I'm a speck of nothingness in this vast creation. It's only Allah's love and mercy that's me going. When we forget Allah's love and mercy and we start relying on people, then we're standing on very shaky ground. That's a very dangerous thing to do, very dangerous game to play. Idha da'ani, when do we actually call on Allah? There are moments of acceptance, for instance, tahajjud, the time, the last third of the night. We all know that Allah has descended to the last heaven. We all know that Allah is saying in this night, who is it that asks me, I will give him? Who is it that wants my forgiveness, I will forgive him? But if it were an international flight we had to catch, we'd be up at that time. But because it's tahajjud and because it's only Allah, hey, relax. Sleep one more night, I'll start it from tomorrow. Idha da'ani, when He calls on me. Day and night we call out, we complain that Allah, I love you. But we don't even sit and talk to Allah. Ida da'ani, we don't call on Him. All of us should make a serious effort to have at least one prayer in the day where you have a lengthy dua. A lengthy dua as in you sit down and you really talk to Allah, as in Allah, this is what I want, this is where I'm going, this is what I'm scared of. Talk to Him like you talk to a friend, like you talk to a confidant or a best friend. When we hear the adhan, we're supposed to read a dua. When we say salam from our obligatory prayers, we're supposed to say a dua. But we're so busy that we don't even have time to read Ayatul Kursi, forget the dua. When we make a dua for a friend, we know that the angel says, Ameen, may the same be for you. Because if you pray for someone behind their back, then the angel says, Ameen, and may you have the same. Remember, and this is very important, dua is worship. This is like when we read Salah or we read the Quran, the worker's done his work. Imagine you have a part-time servant. He comes, he faithfully does his task, and then leaves before you can pay him. You'd laugh at his folly, that why does he come? Why is he working? Doesn't he want his reward? So we go through the Salah, we go through the Sunnahs, we go through the Faraiz and the Nawafil, and then we're too exhausted to claim our wages. If then the tragedy, then what is? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Man lam yas'alillaha yaghdab alayh." Who does not ask Allah, the one who does not ask Allah, Allah is angry with him. Imagine, this actually, more than anything else in the world, I feel, highlights the difference between the Khaliq and the Makhluq, the creator and the creation. The only relationship where you're taught to ask, where you're taught to keep on asking. It's absolutely true. There will come a time when even your mother will snap at you, for heaven's sake, how much money am I supposed to give you this month? Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, Udu'uni astajib lakum, ask me, I will give you. Whatever you want, I will give you, but in the way that is best for you. Now, what exactly are the blocks that prevent us from du'as? What are the blocks that come in our way of confiding in Allah or asking Him for everything? One is fear of that final commitment. This is a sort of distrust that Shaitan has bred within us. Many people are heard to say, I would like to ask Allah, but I feel scared. And the reason that I'm scared is, what if He doesn't give it to me? I don't want to be hurt by Allah. And that's why I don't want to ask Him. It's a lengthy, convoluted way of saying, I don't trust Allah. Basically, that's what you're saying. Analyze your mind and your heart. What stops me from asking Allah for everything? And if this is one of the reasons, then know that this is a block created in your mind by Shaitan, nothing else. That you don't trust Allah, you think Allah is not going to give it to you. Then there are people who say, I only ask Allah for the big things, I don't want to bother Him for the little things. This is what people do. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught us to ask Allah for everything, even if your shoelace breaks. And this is what you should teach your children as well. Get them in the habit of asking Allah, so they too learn the power of dua. Then another very important block is a feeling of arrogance. Sometimes it happens that when people go through sufferings, they become embittered. And when they become embittered, they start blaming Allah for problems. And they start resenting the fact that Allah is allowing these problems to continue. So they say stuff like, well, I've suffered so long, doesn't Allah see that? How many times am I supposed to ask Him? Couldn't He have done something about it by now? Remember, Allah says, Ya ayyuhan nas, antumul fuqara'u ilallah. Mankind, all of you are beggars before Allah. Wallahu huwal ghaniyul hamid. And only Allah is the rich, the self-sufficient, the praiseworthy. You don't want to make dua? Fine, don't make dua, but you're the loser. Antumul fuqara'u ilallah. You're the beggars before Allah. And a beggar is someone who has nothing. And this is what we are before Allah. Everything we have had or ever will have is entirely dependent upon Him and His grace. And then comes the final and most common block, and this is laziness. I just don't have time. Oh, I'd love to make dua, I have so many beautiful duas in my mind all day long, but somehow I just don't get the time to express them. What am I supposed to do? Kids, groceries. Somehow a woman never seems to get time to make dua to Allah. Now, all these blocks, and that's all they are literally nothing more than excuses. Convenient excuses to dodge the real issue, which is, I really am not that interested. Whatever Allah wants to give me, He'll give me, and whatever He doesn't, well, I can't force Him anyway. This sort of pessimistic thinking is not a part of Islam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught us nothing can change destiny except dua. And these are such powerful words, literally they're mind-boggling. Imagine, if you know that the dua you make today can save you or a loved one from an accident tomorrow, wouldn't you take those 5 minutes out of your precious schedule to make that dua, to change your destiny, to change your tomorrow? So this is something we need to be careful about. And again, it comes back to the same thing that we think, oh, dua should be made and I should be in a state of wudu and facing the qibla. No. If you're busy, then make a dua while you're walking or you're doing your work. You can make a dua wherever you are, in whatever state you are. In a state of menstruation, can read duas. Why is that exemption made? So especially days of your menstruation when you're feeling low and miserable anyway, you don't lose the connection. But women, what they do is when they're menstruating, they completely cut off all forms of zikr. They completely stop their morning and evening duas, and then when the 7 or 8 days are over, they complain, oh, it's so difficult to get back in the routine. Well, obviously, because we left our duas. Only recently, a friend of mine was telling me that every day of her life, she reads the morning and evening duas. That she makes sure she reads them. The one day in her life, she forgot them. Her car had a terrible, terrible accident. It was a miracle that everyone was saved. And instantly, because this is the vision of the moment, she connected. She connected the two things and she asked herself, what did I do wrong? And she remembered she'd forgotten the duas. She had forgotten to read her duas for protection because dua is like a weapon.